So in this video, I want to do a very quick recap of the lecture slide that I prepared for WSRP, Warframe Summer Research Program for high school students. This lecture mostly serves as excursion for students to have a great taste of how this tool is used in complex analysis. I don't want to include too much math, but most of the interactive and vibrant examples for students to have first taste of this subject, which I think is really useful and essential to understand complex manifolds in many ways. So let's start. And for prerequisites, almost none, because those kids are highly selective for the programs. I have no problem for them to understand some basic coding and stuff. And if they have experience using the plot functions and graphics, then it will be a big plus because they know how to add options and use a compound of options to make looks better and add some interesting feature of them. And we also have tons of external resources outside of the summer school, but still inside this Warframe system, and some interesting blog posts can also be used if they want to explore something more than what I've posted in this lecture slide. He contributed a lot of great visualization for them, and I also had some interesting visualization for complex analysis. If I learn something more rigorous outside my lecture, they're free to use one of the website I use quite often. It's called Complex Analysis, and they have nice articles about the proofs on where the concepts behind some of the visualization, typically like conformal mappings. It will give them really interesting and mathematically rigorous visualization for most important complex transforms. And I want to make sure this lecture is quite interactive, so I have a very short list of goals for them to explore, and definitely they don't have to finish everything inside the lecture. There are very rough guidelines for them to learn the new things and try new functions or add the things they learn from external source back into the system. So first I have shown them there are existing demonstrations that they can use to download and play with directly without looking too much into the code. And let's also start from the very basics for complex analysis visualization. Is first you always start from Z to Z, the identity map. You understand how zero and the pole looks like on the complex plane, even though these functions are really simple. But for most of the rational functions, even for like elliptic functions, the poles and interpretation of the poles and the zeros will be the most important things for them to understand. The next is, say you have transcendental functions. It will look very different from polynomial and rational functions. One of the reasons is they usually have infinite amount of poles or zeros, or branch cuts. In this case, we have a line that breaks the continuity of the color change. And we also have a list of the poles, on a list of zeros somewhere on the right-hand side of the complex plane. And sometimes we simpler visualization to understand how the function is behave around branch cut, or how to do analytic continuation. And these are actually shown on the graph, like if there is a break of any feature of the mapped complex number, say real parts, argument, or modulus. So in that case, you can show that you once you include something for the log function, say because it's corresponds to different layers in a covering space. So how do you apply the idea of analytic continuity and monodromy stuff? So you can just make something looks broken on the graph, but actually it is connected. So these are something I feel like can be explained to students with more examples, probably not included in the lecture particular slides. Also, I want to show them that's a very interesting external resources I found, usually from some smart people on Reddit or Twitter. They have a very nice visualization and how to recreate it inside Wolfram language. So for example, this complex plot with a very beautiful spiral cutout is actually just from this very interesting complex functions. And if you want to make it smooth, there's a couple of options that students can learn from examples. This complex visualization is not limited to 2D. So for this function that people are familiar with in their high school, like trigonometry, it looks quite different from the regular one if you view them on a complex plane. And you can definitely tell that the one function that probably we learned in high school is just a cut of the plane that pass through 0 and take everything absolute value, because this function for the color band, it is the argument for sine z, and the height is the absolute value for sine z. And since absolute value is always positive, so anything that we see on the for the real plot, it is alternating, but in this case it's just reflect the negative part back to the positive part on the z direction. This would be a very nice section for them to understand, typically visually understand what is the fundamental theorem of algebra. So in this case, you can see I have a bunch of polynomial functions, z squared, z cubed, and z squared minus 1, z squared, z cubed minus 1. Okay, they all look different, but if you just go through a circle that's probably large enough to include the three zeros in this case, and the two zeros in these two cases. These are, well, if you look at just the location of zeros, in this case it's just one. But why I say like more than one zeros in this case? Because you have to include in the winding numbers. So in this case, it's the single position. But if you go through the coloring once, you will see the color like red occurs twice. And you do the same thing here, the red occurs twice, and the same thing for other colors. In this case, the same as you will see like red occurs like 3 times, and in this case, it's, the same thing happened. So this is a very simple illustration of fundamental theory of algebra, and this is indeed how Gauss was proving these things using complex analysis. And you can also create some art by yourself. Like for this one, is that you can just mixture of very simple function, and this is sort of like you shoot first and then you draw a target. So I generate a bunch of zeros. You can see there's a bunch of zeros I randomly generated. If you choose the zeros nicely, this function indeed looks quite interesting. But sometimes you see this spot, but you can tell that it's quite different between these two, because if you go through the circle around it, the sequence of color is different. So which means one of them is 0, the other is a pole. And you can try some other functions that I put here. The next part is about branch cut. In this section, these two art pieces are created by branch cut, and I use density plot instead of complex plot, which also shows to students how to interchange between two different plot functions based on our needs. And you can see the lines inside the graphs indicates branch cut, and these functions looks like flames come off from the hell in spiral motions. So it's really cool. I really want the students to enjoy these interesting functions can be visualized in very short. The next part is more demanding for kids to understand because it includes four-dimensional plot embedded in 3Ds. If you know about branch cut and multi-valued functions, these are the projectives of those functions inside 3D space. There is a function available in function repository intersections called Riemann surface plot 3D. It gives you lots of good examples about multi-value function or functions coming from covering space and how they becomes multi-layered or multi-leaves inside space. And these functions are created by Microtrot, and this function has very good collection of examples. So I feel like never tired of browsing these examples in these functions. The fifth part was about fractals. Mandelbrot or Julia, anything you want. There's a built-in function inside the Wolfram language. It's called Mandelbrot set plot. So you can specify starting point and keep zooming in that directions, and then you can review very detailed properties of fractals in that range. This was originally created for Wolfram's Twitter account, and you can see there's a very nice video about it. And if you choose those points that are really close to the labeled one and keep zooming, it will show you very nice scan of the local property of the Mandelbrots. If you stay very far away from these points and you zoom maybe 3 or 5 magnitudes, then you will see nothing. So it is a very nice experiment for kids to play as well. The last part is the selective bonus section. So if kids are still have energy to follow the lectures and they need something more, you can have Riemann sphere complex plot, and some nice visualization can be used on upper half complex plane like hyperbolic space or modular forms. From LMFDB, the linear L function in the modular form database website. So these are like definitely much more involved, and they do need a little bit more background to understand. But since there are nice YouTube videos by Murty and other great mathematicians on this topic, so if they have time, they can keep the section for themselves and learn from that. One of the example from the linear LMFDB functions. Yes, so that's everything for today. And if you want to learn something, follow this notebook, it's very welcome. And to leave a comment here, and I can help you to answer some questions. Hopefully, some of you will be mentors and teach kids interesting math in the future. Bye-bye.